Amidst chaos, a princess was wed to the crown prince. Theirs was a marriage meant to symbolize peace. The bride's name was Arsinoe Thea Neoparnas. Arsinoe smiles, anticipating a happy future, but her open eyes reveal a sharp resolve. A hand reaches out to take hers. A brown-haired man with purple eyes calls her, "My Arsinoe." Arsinoe takes his hand, smiling nervously. She recalls her first life and this fateful marriage. They seal their vows with a kiss. In that moment, she believed in happiness. Later, her husband descends a dark, winding staircase. He stops before a heavy, ornate door. He peers inside with a sinister smile. Arsinoe kneels on the floor, bloodied and broken, as her husband appears before her. A black-haired man beside him taunts that her life doesn't seem too bad. As she tells the black-haired man to be quiet, her husband approaches, chiding her for being cold. He kneels before her, claiming to bear good news. She realizes with dawning horror that he has finally conquered her homeland, Parnas. He confirms her fears, thanking her for the intelligence she provided about a secret passage that was particularly useful. He smirks, admitting a general caused some trouble. He casually mentions wiping them out as Arsinoe desperately asks about her mother. He coldly informs her that her mother had already been killed. She finally understands his true, monstrous face. He mocks her for crying, a rare sight he notes, as she despairs over her powerlessness. Accepting her fate, she tells him he will kill her now. She reaches for his feet in a final plea. She bows her head to the floor in complete submission. Arsinoe begs for the mercy of dying by her homeland's sacred relic, the sword she always carried. Calling her pitiful, he grants her request, tossing the filthy antique on the ground before her. He turns and prepares to leave. He bids a final, cruel farewell to Arsinoe. As he walks away, she curses the wretched traitor. Defeated, she looks down at the dagger. Picking up the blade, she laments her foolish, ruinous choice. She knows she is the only one left who understands the silver dagger's true power. She reveals its secret. Dying by this dagger returns her to her 12th year. She grips the dagger, her decision made. In her first life, she tried to stop him. In her second, she tried to run. In her third, she became a spy, but that failed too. He had played her like a puppet, discarding her when her use was gone. She resolves that this time will be the last. If this fourth life fails, she will choose the final piece of death. She gasps, her eyes flying open in shock. The younger Arsinoe sits up in bed, bewildered. She has returned to the past once more. Sunlight streams into her room, signaling a new morning. Her eyes now hold a cold, hardened determination. She steps onto the floor, ready to begin again. A young Arsinoe walks purposefully down a hallway. Her expression is one of grim determination. She hurries down the long, sunlit corridor. She bursts through a door looking shocked. She recognizes the woman, thinking her name Rusi. The woman, Rusi, turns with a gentle smile. Rusi stands elegantly in her room. Her expression is filled with gentle concern. Overcome with emotion, Arsinoe begins to cry. She throws herself into Rusi's arms. Rusi returns the embrace with a soft, happy smile. She clutches Rusi, overwhelmed with relief. It was then her life began to fall apart. A plague swept through the royal family, killing everyone. Clinging to Rusi, Arsinoe's resolve hardens. Arsinoe declares she will become a soldier to protect them. She recalls a past life's failure to escape the empire. In her second life, she tried to run, but he caught her. A cruel man with blue eyes considered a punishment to ensure she'd never leave. He cruelly stabbed a needle into her foot. Her screams of agony echoed through the rainy night. The scene shifts to a quiet, sun-dappled forest. She slowly opens her weary eyes. Chained to a tree, she was left for several days. She recalls that the true torture was starvation. The sound of footsteps rouses her from her stupor. The brown-haired man appears, greeting her casually. Desperate, she recognizes him and begs for something to eat. He agrees, presenting a covered platter as a gift. Uncovering it, he reveals a human body to a confused Arsinoe. Her eyes widen in absolute, dawning horror. She screams, recognizing the body as her mother, Rusi. Reeling in shock, she screams again in agony. She chokes out her mother's name in despair. The man smiles cruelly, satisfied with her reaction. He grabs her jaw, commanding her to eat. She turns her head away in silent, disgusted defiance. She inwardly vows to make him taste her despair. He scoffs at her refusal of his gift. He coldly orders his men to gouge out her eyes. Even then, she vows to inflict even greater pain upon him. Bells ring, pulling her from the horrific memory. Back in the present, her long hair is tied up. Dressed in a uniform, Her expression is somber. Recurring nightmares of her past lives fuel her current purpose. Her gaze is cold, her resolve absolute. She stands determined to kill the one who cursed her fate. To do so, she will take up the world's strongest sword. She must find the Grand General, Walter Heiberg. She resolves to become his master. At the military academy, a voice bemoans the cadet's weakness. A blue-haired cadet named Geronimo leads the pack as an instructor yells at them to pick up the pace. Another cadet shouts for a man named Bandel to slow down as he rushes ahead, apologizing. The instructor, Jen, the Grand General's aide-de-camp, yells at the sluggish larvae to move faster. A red-haired boy complains that he can't possibly run at the same speed as a lichen. He turns to Arsinoe, noting the murderous look in her eyes, and asking if she had a nightmare. Jen threatens that the last one to finish will be tied to the academy bell, making the boy scream in terror. After the grueling run, the cadets collapse while Arsinoe stands, catching her breath. The red-haired boy lies on the ground, complaining about their wolf of a training instructor. A blue-haired cadet warns him to be quiet, reminding him of a lichen's exceptional hearing. Arsinoe overhears their conversation and smiles faintly to herself. The red-haired boy scoffs, doubting the Grand General would have a drugged-up wolf as a subordinate. He boldly bets 100 laps that he's right, but stops when a voice calls his full name, Cadet Geronimo Rass. Instructor Jen looms over Geronimo, menacingly asking what he said about being, quote, drugged up. Jen explains the drug prevents them from losing control during a full moon, where they could tear someone to shreds. He clarifies that lichens are locked up and drugged for 3 days so they don't go berserk, and Geronimo bows in apology. Jen then announces a special afternoon lecture by the Grand General, and Arsinoe's eyes widen. The cadets buzz with excitement, shocked that the legend himself is coming to speak to them. In the lecture hall, Geronimo calls for Lucy, who is Arsinoe, to join him and his friend. He asks why she's sitting alone, but she coldly tells them they are too noisy. Arsinoe ignores them, her gaze fixed on the front of the hall. The lecture hall is filled with silent, waiting cadets. The heavy double doors at the front slowly begin to open. Arsinoe looks up, her expression intent as the guest arrives. In a dark memory, Arsinoe's former husband wonders how to lure a certain man to him. He furiously grabs a bruised woman, ordering his men to drag the wretch to him by any means necessary. The prince broods, thinking that without that man, Parnas would have already fallen, negating the need for their foolish marriage. Back in the present, a heavy military boot steps into the hall. Arsinoe watches the entrance, her expression a mix of awe and resolve. A man with dark hair appears, introduced as the Invincible Commander. He is the national hero, the strength of Parnas, the Grand General. The legendary Walter Heiberg enters, his presence commanding the room. Among the iron-blooded Heiberg family, Walter was said to be exceptional. He graduated from the military academy early and became the youngest brigadier general in history. At age 22, he stood bloodied over a fallen foe. He became great general after crushing the Lichen Rebellion, his combat skills and leadership superior in every way. His power was amplified by his magic sword, Dawn. The sword rests at his side, its hilt gleaming. Arsinoe observes his blade, thinking it looks surprisingly ordinary. Her gaze shifts to the man himself, finding him more refined than she'd imagined. The other cadets whisper in surprise, having expected someone huge and terrifying. They conclude he looks more like a handsome scholar than a soldier. Walter stands at the podium and opens the floor to questions, excluding classified information. Hands fly up as cadets eagerly ask questions, but Arsinoe remains silent, contemplating. She studies him intently, planning her own move. As he begins speaking, she wonders to herself if she can make him hers. She knows Walter is a man of principle, and resolves to find a way to make him remember her. A green-haired cadet stands and asks about his lichen adjutant. While Arsinoe plans to speak with him later, the cadet presses Walter on how his lichen subordinates felt about him killing their leader. Arsinoe internally fumes, wondering who could ask such a foolish question. Walter recalls how the lichen leader, Takashin, posed as a hero while secretly inflating phantom herb prices and using berserk lichens as cannon fodder. She thinks angrily, questioning why his race matters when punishing a criminal. Her thoughts spoken aloud, Arsinoe suddenly stands, drawing the room's attention. Realizing her mistake, she freezes as the blue-haired cadet confirms she said everything out loud. Walter calmly asks how a cadet obtained classified information. Annoyed with herself, Arsinoe listens as Walter explains his soldiers knew the truth, so there was no unrest. He declares that the premise of the green-haired cadet's question was fundamentally flawed. He continues, stating that once enlisted, a soldier's only identity is that of a soldier. Walter proclaims that any threat to the kingdom, whether human or lichen, is an enemy. He concludes his lecture by reminding them of Parnassus's military law: protect all allies without discrimination, and the cadets respond with a resounding, "Yes, sir!" As the lecture ends, Arsinoe stands with purpose. She calls out to the Grand General, asking for a moment of his time. Walter gazes down at her from the podium, waiting. Leaving the lecture hall, Walter and Arsinoe walk side by side. They stop in a quiet courtyard outside the Academy building. Walter turns to her with a knowing look. Shocked, Arsinoe asks if he knows who she is. He reveals he recognizes her as the princess, having heard she'd enrolled at the academy. He adds that her mother was quite worried about her. Arsinoe realizes he knows her mother and thanks him for his concern. Walter's expression turns serious as he listens. She believes he sees her as a mere 16-year-old greenhorn, unfit for real combat. She asks how many royal family members there are, and he answers that there are 10. With a confident smile, Arsinoe declares there will soon be only one: her. She narrates that her mother is a nameless concubine, confined to the palace like a bird in a lavish cage. Walter is silent for a moment before addressing her again. Arsinoe explains she joined the academy to learn, not to remain trapped in the palace. Her expression hardens with the weight of her royal status. He asks if she truly means her words, and she confirms it without hesitation. She asks if he is loyal to the royal family, and he vows that he is, for as long as he lives. A brilliant smile spreads across her face as her plan begins to form. The glowing symbol of the royal crown appears. She expresses her desire to work with him, privately resolving to make him hers. Confused, Walter asks why she wants to work with him. Surrounded by yellow flowers, she replies sweetly that it's because he's admirable. Walter seems taken aback by her simple, direct praise. She insists that he remember her words and her face. He agrees, his gaze hinting at a distant memory. A brief flashback shows a much younger, wide-eyed Arsinoe. Bowing slightly, Walter says he will await her graduation. He turns and begins to walk away from her. Arsinoe watches him go, a satisfied smile on her face. His legendary sword, Dawn, gleams with a radiant light. The scene shifts to the academy dormitories. Arsinoe sits at her desk, looking at a formal scroll. She glances over her shoulder, her expression thoughtful. Geronimo stands at her door with his luggage, asking if she's leaving as she prepares to depart. He laments that after all their work, graduating to face this outcome feels strange. A narrative reveals that Geronimo, who dreamed of being a soldier, was forced to become his family's heir after his brother's accident. Geronimo questions why Arsinoe is returning to the palace when she was top of the class with an officer's offer. With a confident smile, she reveals she has unfinished business at the palace. She plans to flee the detached palace with her mother and hide in the north for years. Stunned, Geronimo asks if His Majesty would ever permit such a thing. He calls her the craziest person he knows. She playfully returns the sentiment. Geronimo offers his support, telling her to make it work and contact him once she's settled. She smiles warmly, promising that she will. The scene shifts to a formal court, where the stern Duke Gadel is introduced. A grim narration recounts the recent deaths of the royal family, leaving only 2 princes and a power vacuum. The kingdom's powerful figures gather in a grand hall, their attention fixed on the succession crisis. As Walter Heiberg enters, the pressing question is, who will become the next king? From the assembly, a voice questions the wisdom of leaving the throne empty. A dark-haired man declares the Parnassus line broken and urges them to get to the point. Duke Kale listens with a grim, unyielding expression. A question is asked about the new candidate as Walter stands ready to speak. Walter formally nominates Arsinoe Thea Neoparnassus, the 5th princess, as the successor. Duke Kale looks annoyed, contemptuously asking who she even is. The nobles begin to murmur, gossiping about her mother's slave origins and her own unsuitability to rule. The Duke dismisses Walter's choice, calling the princess an unprepared talent. Walter challenges the council, asking if they seek a mere regent or a true new king. He pointedly reminds them of the Royal Army Service Creed's first article. The creed is recited over a scene of soldiers pledging their unwavering loyalty to the royal house of Parnassus. Their vow to protect the royal house concludes as Walter watches, his resolve firm. He turns his head as someone addresses him as Sir Heiberg. Walter leaves the tense council meeting, walking down the hall alone. He is stopped by Marchioness Vanessa Rutherford, who asks if the meeting has concluded. Vanessa notes the chaos that ensued after he left, but Walter seems unfazed. When she hints at a new dynasty, he firmly states that Duke Kale cannot become king. The Marchioness looks at him, puzzled by his definitive declaration. Walter's gaze is steady, prepared to justify his position. Vanessa bursts into laughter, asking why they've wasted their efforts and can't claim the throne. Walter poses a leadership riddle, save 100 refugees or distribute 50 cattle. She questions if a king would really choose the refugees, as an image of them appears. He explains a true king finds a third way: save the refugees and give them the cattle to become farmers. A king, he states, is one who embraces all his people and guides them to prosperity. Skeptical, she asks if the concubine's daughter can do that. Walter confidently affirms she can. Vanessa warns him that Duke Kale plans to reconvene the council in a month and is gathering soldiers. Walter listens to the warning in stoic silence. The Marchioness watches him go with a faint, knowing smile. Reclining, she expresses her hope that the political turmoil will end peacefully. Walking alone, Walter reflects on the recklessness of nominating someone without her consent. He recalls meeting her a year ago and wonders if she is still on the run. In a snowy wilderness, a command rings out to, "Get her!" As a lone figure flees, the fleeing figure is Arsinoe, who grimly realizes she has been caught again. She leaps across a snowy cliff, her expression one of grim determination as she evades her pursuers. The story comes to a pause, marking the chapter's end. The scene transitions to the bleak, cold interior of a stone prison. Arsinoe's eye opens in frustration as she wonders why she always ends up captured. Sitting in her cell, she despairs over how to escape and whether her mother knows of her capture. A voice yells for Arsinoe, throwing a loaf of bread into her cell for her meal as she winces from the noise. A man with a mustache stands behind bars as a voice asks why he was caught this time. A winged man claims he was helping refugees, but his companion scoffs, calling them thieves. A blonde woman asks if he profited from his actions, and he replies it was never about money. The man in the cell angrily declares that the Lycans deserve to be oppressed and die in the Empire. The woman rebukes him, arguing anyone would seek asylum if they were tormented to death. Lycans fleeing the Empire often drift to Pomnos, a land ruled by their sworn enemies, the Rafi, where they are destined to die. A small, lone Lycan child sits hunched over in a boat, drifting on dark waters. The woman is reminded of her own and her mother's struggles by the Lycan's desperate fight for a new life. The winged man calls the creatures monsters, but the woman challenges his prejudice, prompting him to remind her of their dangerous location with a tap on the bars. She muses how peaceful it would be if everyone could just get along, but he scolds her for acting as an illegal broker, a fact she snaps back she already knows. As she eats, she recalls her plan to wait for the king's death, but her acts of kindness made her famous for aiding Lycans, forcing her to consider moving. A confident step announces an arrival, and the man in the cell remarks on how quickly the visitor came. The dark-haired Grand General, Walter, appears in a brilliant light, formally greeting the shocked woman as Your Highness. The scene shifts to a snowy village as the woman invites her guest inside, explaining her mother is at the nursery caring for Rafi children. Seated comfortably, she smiles, asking Walter if he truly traveled all the way to Pomnos just for her. Walter holds his teacup, a moment of quiet contemplation before he answers. He smiles warmly, admitting his mind is at ease now that he sees she is safe, confirming her suspicions. Walter explains that his arguments against being her guardian were ignored, and that he knew this day would come ever since signing as her guarantor. The woman recalls her past desperation, branded as a criminal, and her shock when the person sent to her was none other than Walter. Their eyes meet in a moment of quiet intensity. She explains that she never intended to become a savior. The Lycans simply came to her seeking help. Walter points out she's said that before, leaving her flustered and lamenting her constant lack of grace around him. His expression turns serious as he warns that two neighboring kingdoms are preparing for war, fearing Parnas may be caught in the crossfire. She holds her cup, assuring him that even in Pomnos, she remains a loyal citizen of Parnas. Walter looks at her, a silent question in his eyes. She delivers shocking news with a grim expression. His Majesty the King died 10 days ago. Clink, a teacup falls as she reels from the news, thinking it's too soon, while Walter reveals a strange illness had been spreading among officials. Walter kneels before her, formally requesting permission to proclaim her the 19th sovereign of Parnas. She can only stare back, utterly speechless. A sudden crack marks a vision of a crumbling stone hand. The scene changes as Walter stretches, waking from sleep. A memory surfaces of Walter kneeling before her ghostly figure, reporting that the king and the entire royal family had been wiped out. Her thoughts race. Their deaths came too soon, ruining her plan to claim the throne 3 years from now. Her original strategy was to let a three-kingdom war weaken the royal authority of Parnas. She reflects that while the disease ruined her timeline for winning Walter over, she somehow made him her ally anyway, unsure whether to be pleased. Walter finishes a morning stretch. The woman greets him with a teapot, asking if he is awake, and he explains he was just splitting firewood. Unfazed by the cold, Walter picks up his sword, assuring her he's used to harsh training conditions. She laughs, amused that his formal speech patterns don't fit the rugged scene, much to his confusion. She smiles playfully, asking him to please put on some clothes so they can discuss important matters. The scene transitions to a quiet, snow-covered village on a hillside. As Walter sips his tea, she privately observes that despite his title, he doesn't seem like a soldier at all. She glances at his magnificent sword planted in a snowdrift and asks if it's safe to leave it there. He casually offers to put it away, making a beckoning gesture with his hand. Zing, with a flash of light, the sword flies from the snow directly into his waiting hand, much to her surprise. She stares, amazed, asking if the sword truly returned to him on its own. A log is kicked into the air, flying straight toward Walter and his glowing sword. He effortlessly splits the log mid-air as she imagines him single-handedly charging into an enemy camp. She silently observes him, thinking his power is a completely broken ability. She finally asks why someone like him wants to make her king. His answer that she's of the Emperor's bloodline fails to convince her. Arsinoe looks him in the eye and asks for the real reason he chose her. Walter hesitates, searching for the right words to begin. Confused by his demeanor, she asks if he likes criminals, prompting him to apologize for his poor wording. He reveals he knows she has helped Lycans and Lafty for over a year, quoting her belief that a true king protects all. A brief flashback shows another man watching a prison, thinking that forcing the Lycans to another country would be a peaceful solution. Arsinoe states that if he considers her past actions to be minor, that's all the more reason to support her now. Moved, Walter vows to devote his life to proving her worth if she will let him stay by her side. She inwardly agrees, thinking he's the sword she intended to obtain anyway. Walter stands beside a wooden cart and says that he understands. Arsinoe steps towards him, confidently ordering him to protect her. She tells him he is the only one she can trust, and he earnestly promises to do his best. Privately, she resolves that one day he will be the sword of her revenge, and then she will become the king he desires. The scene transitions to a grand palace, where two nobles are seated at a table in an opulent room. A red-haired woman with a fan remarks on how quickly the month has passed, noting it's already autumn. Duke von Witten asks her not to slip away from the meeting this time. He stresses the urgency of their situation, but the red-haired woman claims she is not on anyone's side. Duke Goodell Kale makes a grand, sparkling entrance into the room. As Duke Kale enters, the red-haired woman notes that everyone's intentions are aligning and wonders what Sir Heiberg will do. TSK, Duke Kale expresses his annoyance at having to ask for attendance before officially starting the meeting. Walter appears at the doorway and is beckoned to enter. The sound of elegant footsteps echoes as a woman in a red gown walks down a luxurious carpet. Dressed in a stunning red gown, Arsinoe arrives and greets the assembled nobles. The other nobles wonder who she is, while Duke Kale watches her with a smug, knowing smile. Duke Kale greets her, remarking on her growth and asking about her mother, Lady Ancilla, whom she confirms as well. He comments that she seems better suited to being outside the palace, a subtle jab Arsinoe recognizes as a power move. The other nobles whisper amongst themselves, realizing she is the daughter of the concubine, Ancilla. A title card introduces Duke Goodell Kale, whose immense wealth rivals that of the royal family. His background is revealed, a powerful noble who ruled without resistance, but whose dominance is also his greatest weakness. Arsinoe apologizes for her sudden appearance, stating she has something important to say. She asks for permission to speak bluntly, which Duke Kale grants with condescending generosity. She decries the unprecedented vacancy of the throne, noting the paralysis of the kingdom's administration and diplomacy. Arsinoe laments the Lord's indecisiveness, prompting a look of irritation from Duke Kale at her perceived arrogance. A close-up shows her hands clasped together, her resolve firm. She stands before them, her expression resolute, and her fangs slightly bared. Duke Kale challenges her to name the most suitable candidate, secretly vowing to silence her permanently if she names herself. With her back to the council, Arsinoe declares that the one most befitting the throne is present in the room. Duke Kale is stunned by her audacity, while Arsinoe's expression remains determined. She repeats her statement, affirming that the person most suited to be king is there. The Duke stares, speechless at her bold declaration. Walter steps forward in shock, questioning what the princess could possibly be saying. Arsinoe glances back over her shoulder. Meeting Walter's surprised gaze, she bows her head gracefully, maintaining her composure. Chuckling, Duke Kale dismisses her words as a wild fantasy and demands she retract the outrageous statement. Arsinoe denies any intention of slander, claiming the timing is simply bad before questioning the Duke about recent traffic through his territory. She reveals that Lycan slaves conscripted by the Empire have been flowing into the neighboring country of Dopine. She reminds them that Dopine is at war with Antavasila and has a weak military, raising suspicion. The red-haired woman realizes Dopine provoked the war, finding it strange and wondering what it could mean. Arsinoe's eyes blaze as she implies the Empire is secretly behind the war. Outraged, Duke Bon Witten slams his fist on the table and calls her accusation utter nonsense. Walter steps forward to corroborate her story, stating that the princess has been helping Lycan refugees from the conflict for 2 years and has sufficient evidence. Marchioness Vanessa requests confirmation from Raffi, as Walter listens and understands. A title card explains Duke Hale's immense wealth and pro-empire political leanings. Arsinoe argues that if the Duke becomes king, he'll be seen as an imperial puppet disgracing the royal family. The Duke claims he can nullify the agreement, but Arsinoe counters that he has no basis, leaving him speechless. Arsinoe declares that until the Empire makes its move, she will be the one to protect the throne. Duke Kale scoffs at her ambition to become king, but she cryptically adds that there is one more thing. With stunning confidence, Arsinoe reveals that she knows the cure for the plague. Marchioness Vanessa is shocked, asking if she can really cure the disease, adding that it would help her own daughter. Duke Kale demands an explanation as Arsinoe internally challenges him to get angry and questions Walter's loyalty. Her inner monologue dares him to resent her for challenging his authority, but he remains silent. The Duke's face darkens as he incredulously thinks, "Support you?" Thump! His fist clenches tightly in suppressed rage. Duke Kale furiously dismisses her claim as a lie to seize power, yelling that no scholar has found a cure. Arsinoe calmly clarifies that she will only share the cure with those who support her. A noblewoman in pink stands up, calling the statement ridiculous and accusing Arsinoe of making threats. Walter steps forward, silently taking his place by Arsinoe's side in a clear show of allegiance. Walter invokes the name of the late king, declaring her answer to be the will of the entire kingdom's army. Drawing his sword, he kneels before her in a formal pledge. Bathed in light, Walter bows his head in a solemn oath. He presents his sword as Arsinoe speaks of the dawn that will light their path. With unwavering resolve, Walter looks up, awaiting her command. Arsinoe stands tall before him, accepting his vow of fealty. She turns back to face the stunned Duke and the council. As the Duke seethes, Arsinoe perceives he knows he is losing and grants him one day to decide. She dismisses those who oppose her, expressing her hope to see her new allies again tomorrow. Having made their stand, Arsinoe and Walter depart the council chamber together. They walk down the hall, leaving the tense meeting behind them. Walter glances back, his expression cool and unreadable. The scene shifts to an elegant private chamber with a wash basin. Now in a different dress, Arsinoe admits she cannot figure out what Walter is truly thinking. In a flashback, she recalls how in her 2 previous lives, he was known as the loyal dog of the Parnas royal family. Troubled by her memories, Arsinoe touches her head in contemplation. The doors burst open as a cat-eared man urgently calls for the Grand General. Arsinoe looks up, startled by the sudden and loud interruption. Troubled by her thoughts, she holds her head as she tries to make sense of the past. A Lycan man bursts through the doors, shouting for the Grand General. He stops, noticing Arsinoe's flushed cheeks and wet hair from a recent bath. A flicker of recognition crosses his face as Arsinoe smiles and asks if he remembers her. He suddenly remembers her from the academy, shouting her name Arsinoe and eagerly asking why she is there. She vaguely says she has business and will be leaving, but he informs her the Grand General is returning soon, so she decides to wait. The cat-eared man mentions the general has been acting alone lately and asks if something is wrong. Arsinoe has a moment of realization, murmuring to herself about the full moon. He asks about the strange smell from her pouch. She claims it's nothing special. He opens it anyway, finding pretty stones in a vial, noting one could fetch a good price. His gaze falls upon a different, less appealing item in his hand. He sniffs a strange, bone-like object, and she explains it's supposedly a dragon's tailbone. He lights up with excitement, having never tasted dragon bones, a supposed Lycan delicacy. Arsinoe confesses with a weary sigh that it's just a fake she bought from a swindler at the market. She playfully flicks the fake bone at him, and he expertly catches it in his mouth. Knock, knock. A sharp rap sounds on the chamber doors. Walter appears at the door, announcing that dinner is ready. Flash. With a stoic expression, Walter throws the cat-eared man across the room. Arsinoe thinks the throw is a bit much, as the flustered Lycan formally greets a silent Walter. Walter asks if the Lycan came for paperwork, then dismisses him to rest, promising to send them over. The Lycan man suddenly grabs Arsinoe's arm. He advises her to give the stone she had to the Grand General. A stressed Walter apologizes for his adjutant, explaining he's still recovering from the full moon. Arsinoe dismisses the apology and asks him not to call her Your Majesty when they're alone. He stops abruptly at her request. Walter formally rejects her plea, stating he cannot commit insubordination. Arsinoe recalls her tragic past lives, rising from a concubine's daughter to a crown princess, only to die a criminal. A close-up reveals the fiery determination in her eye. Returning to the present, she realizes that status, class, and titles are meaningless illusions. She turns to Walter with a soft smile. She gently asks him to relax when they are off duty. With a cheerful expression, she again encourages him to relax, but he looks conflicted. Walter remains stubbornly silent, his face tense. Relenting with a thumbs up, Arsinoe suggests they get dinner first. The scene transitions to the palace exterior at twilight. Walter asks when the palace lockdown will end. Arsinoe says not until the plague is gone, and he must stay at headquarters. Arsinoe notes that since she lost her quarters, the real inconvenience falls on him. She gazes out a window, her expression calm and thoughtful. She predicts that the council meeting will have fewer attendees tomorrow. Walter listens intently, his gaze fixed on her. He warns her that Duke Kale is a shrewd politician who will be difficult to handle. Arsinoe agrees, noting the Duke is the only one who can unite the independent lords, which Walter confirms. She turns and asks Walter if his forces would lose against Duke Kale's knights. A faint, confident smile plays on Walter's lips. Her stomach rumbles as she beams with delight, suggesting they eat. A surprised Walter agrees to dinner as the scene fades to night. An announcer declares Lady Arsinoe's arrival at a grand dining hall. Click, clack. As she walks, Arsinoe notes that Duke Kale still refuses to acknowledge her as king. She takes her seat at the head of the table, looking regal and composed. Marchioness Vanessa looks on from across the table. A knight opens the grand doors to the chamber. A line of knights marches into the dining hall in perfect formation. The ornate doors close behind them. Arsinoe smiles, announcing she has prepared a gift and the numbers match perfectly. With a confident look, she repeats that her gift has been prepared in advance. The knights place covered silver platters before the seated nobles. Uncovered, the Marchioness's platter reveals a medicinal herb and a letter, leaving her stunned. In a flashback, Duke Witten offers the herb to a distrustful woman. The Marchioness's eyes widen with dawning horror as she understands the implication. She desperately asks if Arsinoe can truly save her daughter, and Arsinoe promises a full recovery in 2 months. A man presents an ornate vial, holding it out over Arsinoe's gloved hand. A young noblewoman looks on in shock, while Arsinoe holds the vial with a calm smile. The other lords at the table begin to whisper amongst themselves. Arsinoe and her knight sit calmly at the long, sparsely populated table. The nobles speculate that the former king was poisoned by a fake elixir of immortality. The red-haired Marchioness reveals that it was the first queen who started the rumor about the elixir. Marchioness Vanessa blames herself for her daughter's illness, but Arsinoe says everyone is culpable. Having said her piece, the red-haired Marchioness announces her departure for the day. The scene shifts to a tall castle tower against a starry night sky. A dramatic view from below shows the tower reaching into the night. From a high window in the tower, a lone figure climbs out into the darkness. Consumed by resentful fury, a black-haired man thinks he should have ruined her long ago. The tower room is now empty, its arched doorway open to the night. In a rainy flashback, a voice counts off as young knights train. A knight's armored hand grips a wooden training sword tightly in the downpour. A blonde woman with red eyes watches from a window, noting their training in the rain. A black-haired man at his desk explains they train daily for any unforeseen circumstances. In the pouring rain, the blonde woman recalls the misery of training in such conditions. Overwhelmed by a painful memory, her head spins with confused thoughts. Walter asks if she has something to say, while she internally panics about getting shot. He reveals he was thinking about the medicine as a chibi version of her confirms it's in order. She bows her head, a silent moment passing between them. Walter reveals the first queen's once rosy cheeks became unnaturally pale, a sign of what was to come. In a flashback, the elegant first queen is doted on by her ladies-in-waiting. The queen cruelly tells a younger Arsinoe that the cosmetic is something a vulgar person like her could never use. Young Arsinoe's eyes blaze with hatred, realizing the queen was using poison out of jealousy. Returning to the present, she asks Walter if the substance is what she thinks it is. He confirms the nobles used the silver medicine, which worsens when exposed to steam. Arsinoe confesses with grim satisfaction that she was the one who spread the steaming method. Walter prepares to deliver surprising news, and she asks what it is. She calmly reports that the third prince murdered the fifth prince before jumping from the tower. Unfazed, Walter admits he isn't sad, as the third prince was his greatest enemy. He apologizes for his bluntness, but she is already thinking of how to handle the lords. Walter watches her silently as they stand in the grand room. A dark resolve hardens her expression as she thinks of those who tormented her and her mother. She vows this will be her final life, freeing her from their faces forever. With a sharp grin, she catches Walter off guard, pointing out he called her "Your Majesty" again. Flustered, he recoils slightly, caught in his formal address. Putting the slip-up aside, she says there is something more important. With a determined look, she beckons him to come closer. Walter steps toward her, his expression unreadable. He obediently extends his open hand before her. She recalls the Lycan adjutant advising her to show the stone to the Grand General. A flicker of realization crosses her eye as she remembers the advice. She looks up at Walter, a plan forming in her mind. As she places a beautiful, glowing stone in his hand, she's surprised by his delighted reaction. She gives him a playful, two-fingered salute. A title card introduces Walter Heiberg, whose hobby is collecting rocks. He marvels at the stone's unique pattern. Arsino beams, pleased by his genuine appreciation. Walter gives a rare, brilliant smile, thanking Rusi and promising to treasure her gift. Stunned by his smile and the use of a nickname, she can only stammer an affirmation. Walter assures her he will handle reorganizing the palace while she is busy. The scene briefly focuses on her arm as the moment passes. Crash! The cat-eared Lycan bursts in, shouting that there is a huge problem. He pants in the doorway, as Walter tiredly asks what the emergency is this time. The adjutant urgently presents a letter, claiming a certain bastard just delivered it. The black-haired man silently reads the urgent letter. The Lycan adjutant panics, shouting that the Duke is declaring an independent state, but the man remains unfazed, saying he's glad he appears calm. A blonde woman carrying books arrives, greeting the Lycan adjutant as instructor. Walter confirms her presence as she looks between the two men. The fanged Lycan adjutant fumes, explaining the Duke plans to unite the West and has warned them not to interfere. Shocked, the blonde woman thinks it can't be right, wondering why he'd be angry. Walter agrees with her assessment, leaving the Lycan adjutant baffled by their calm reactions. She questions how the Duke delivered the proclamation so quickly and directly to the other lords, bypassing official channels. She reveals that she already knew Duke Kale was gathering soldiers. Walter points out the clever political phrasing, calling it independence, not rebellion. The question is raised, why not stage a revolt if he has enough troops to establish a nation? An older man with black hair is shown, his cunning strategy described as sacrificing the flesh to cut the bone. His method is explained. Take a foolish loss to create an opening, then viciously strike the opponent's throat, leaving one to wonder what he's willing to sacrifice. Arsino turns to Walter, predicting the outcome in about a month. With a confident sparkle in her eyes, she orders the proclamation for her coronation to be sent out immediately. A determined smile graces her face. Walking down a grand hall, Walter tells Jen, the Lycan adjutant, to show proper courtesy. Jen finds addressing Arsino as Your Majesty awkward, while Walter notes her behavior is unusual. The Lycan adjutant stretches casually beside the stoic Walter. Jen expresses his astonishment at Arsino's fearless wisdom despite her youth, asking Walter if he isn't also surprised. Walter gives a subtle, knowing smirk. Jen internally panics, shocked to see the great general actually smirk. The scene shifts to a beautiful sun-drenched vineyard. A hand holds a clump of rich soil. A man in a vest kneels amongst the grapevines and barrels. The older man, Duke Kale, smiles, pleased with another bountiful year that will produce decent wine. He states that the most important ingredient is time and patience. Looking up at the sky, he muses that if this is true for wine, what little whelp dares covet his precious land? A young man with dark green hair, identified as Atland, son of Kale, appears, announcing he has a document from the royal palace. After reading the scroll, Duke Kale realizes she intends to hold her coronation immediately. Atland is shocked, recalling their plan was to lure her to their founding ceremony and take her prisoner before striking the palace. A faint, confident smile appears on Duke Kale's face. The grand doors to a throne room crack open. Arsinoe stands before the empty throne, ready for the game to begin. A promotional image shows the title art for the series. On a palace balcony at night, a voice asks if Your Majesty would like to see the audience chambers. The view reveals the grand, moonlit interior of the chamber. Arsinoe stands alone, gazing at the magnificent, glowing throne. Walter assures her the slightly messy room will be perfectly organized before her coronation. Gazing at the throne, she quietly says it looks good. In a flashback, she recalls confronting her father, the king, telling him she knew he sent assassins for her and her mother, but he died instead. She defiantly states that she was the one who returned alive. Back in the present, Walter asks if she'd like to proceed further, but she says this is enough. Her expression is calm and resolute in the moonlight. She stands alone in the center of the vast, empty hall. The scene transitions through panels of the starry night sky. The palace exterior is shown under the moonlight. Entering a lavish room, she addresses Walter as General. A person in the foreground is seen holding a book as Arsinoe and Walter enter. A white-haired man with large, feathered wings sits serenely. Walter introduces the man as Captain Wis Bomdeman, her new escort. Wis gives a slight nod, offering a formal greeting. While Walter scolds Wis for his lack of respect, Arsinoe introduces herself as the leader of the Titmouse Corps 8th Division. Walter questions if the Titmouse Corps is the Royal Guard, but Arsinoe clarifies they are a secret Lafi intelligence unit. Walter asks Wis if he's encountered one of their kind before. Wis recalls a harsh, snowy northern village, noting that humans cannot survive there. Arsinoe remarks that the southern region of Pomnos was quite livable. Wis looks to the side, slightly flustered by her comment. It's explained that the Lafi are a race of city-states, deeply attached to their hometowns. Arsinoe excitedly asks if he's serious, as Walter watches. He remembers a profitable venture selling smoked trout and malt mushrooms. Grasp. Arsinoe seizes his hand, questioning why he'd live in a remote village. Her enthusiastic energy leaves Walter momentarily speechless. A thought bubble expresses admiration for such a noble woman. Wis smiles warmly, touched by her genuine interest. He remembers someone with honey-colored hair from Parnassus 2 years ago. Startled, Wis looks over as Arsinoe touches his shoulder. He dismisses the memory, saying the person only had brute strength. Arsinoe recoils in shock, completely baffled by his words. With a newfound respect, Wis bows his head deeply. He properly introduces himself as Wis Bomdeman, son of a chieftain, pledging his full loyalty, while Arsinoe internally apologizes for deceiving him to gain his strength. The scene transitions, showing the grand moonlit room. Arsinoe asks about the number of enemy soldiers, and Wis confirms there are around 2,000. She finds the number odd, knowing Duke Hale wouldn't move with so few troops. Walter reports that a search by all Lathi units yielded nothing. Arsinoe leans back, confidently stating they don't know the Duke's true weapon. Walter ponders her words, wondering if Kale's weapon is Portmeyer Harbor. Wis asks if the weapon is on the ships, his eyes widening in horror as he realizes what might be hidden inside them. The scene shifts to the massive fleet docked at Portmeyer Harbor. Inside the ship's holds, legions of armored soldiers stand waiting in darkness. A dark, oppressive feeling hangs in the air. The scene transitions to a quiet, moonlit garden path. In a secluded part of the woods, a lone bench sits empty. A weathered map lies discarded on the ground. Arsinoe sits alone on the bench, lost in silent contemplation. Walter stands under the full moon, his expression unreadable. Her hand clenches as she steels her resolve. Walter's gaze remains fixed and serious in the starlight. He approaches, complimenting her ability to find him, and she notes that few know of this path. Walter recognizes it as the overgrown path to Lady Ancilla's palace, which Arsinoe explains nobles avoided. As they walk, her expression hardens with determination. She tells Walter to rest, insisting that, as the king, she will handle the pursuit herself. A quiet, intense moment passes between them. Walter looks away, a subtle blush on his cheeks. A confident, knowing smile plays on Arsinoe's lips. The scene opens on a grand bridge leading to the palace, adorned with banners. Walter stands ready in a hooded traveler's cloak. He urges her to reconsider her dangerous plan, but Arsinoe cheerfully dismisses his worry, saying death is a fine outcome. A purple-haired man with dark wings peeks into the room. The winged man bows nervously, offering a formal greeting to Her Majesty. Jen bursts in to announce the operation is ready, only to stop in confusion at the unexpected gathering. The white-haired man disdainfully comments on the loud entrance. Enraged, Jen demands to know what he said, as Arsinoe notes their rivalry. Jen furiously calls Wis a bird brain, but the winged man calmly demands his attention. Walter steps between them, forbidding such language in front of Her Majesty. With a pleasant smile, Arsinoe decides they can worry about the consequences later. Walter acknowledges the purple-haired winged man waiting for him. The winged man hands Walter a long chain. Walter officially appoints a determined Jen as the interim commander of the Golden Eagle Battalion. Wis gives a secret order to the hooded figure, telling him to evacuate someone if things get dangerous, even if it means disobeying the queen. The hooded figure turns to Arsinoe, who looks back with a questioning gaze. Arsinoe gives Walter his own critical mission, to secure the most important card in the operation. In a flashback, a younger Walter asks if the mission guarantees Rusi's safety, and she realizes he means her. The younger Walter desperately pleads with her to tell him. The hooded figure prepares to be airlifted, holding a chain attached to the purple-haired winged man as Arsinoe watches. The hooded man looks back with a serious expression before they depart. Arsinoe peeks out, stating she'll wait until the sword returns. The winged man takes flight, carrying the hooded figure into the sky by the chain. With the sun setting, Arsinoe decides it's finally time to begin the hunt. The two figures soar over the vast ocean under a starry night sky. They arrive high above their destination, Port Mire Harbor, Duke Kale's territory. The purple-haired man named Napari warns the Grand General that it's dangerous to land here and they should go further in. Walter dismisses the warning, ordering a direct infiltration of the castle ramparts and commanding Napari to descend. Walter plummets rapidly toward the castle below. He deftly unhooks the chain and lands silently on the castle wall. Walter stands watch atop a tower, silhouetted against the night sky. A guard calls out, but Walter instantly appears and strikes him down with a silent blow to the throat. As the first guard collapses, another spots the intruder and screams for help. Walter neutralizes the second guard with another precise, disabling strike. He sprints down the rampart, leaving unconscious guards in his wake. Walter's expression is one of pure focus as he continues his mission. The scene shifts to a grand, empty throne room. Banners hang in the silent, waiting hall. Hidden in a corner, the white-haired Whis sits, clutching a bleeding wound. Arsinoe complains about the noise he's making after she went to great lengths to hide him, but he tells her to calm down. Whis calls her plan reckless, and she laughs, remarking that the Grand General said the same thing. Arsinoe tells him to be patient, as it's only 3 o'clock. She looks on with resolve, a blue coolant stone hanging from Whis' uniform. He notices her staring intently at the blue stone on his chest. She smiles sheepishly, admitting she's never seen a coolant stone before. He tells her she can stare all she wants, as the stone's temperature is perfectly safe. Whis explains that the stones are as valuable as diamonds, that there are only 12 Lappi in total, and that recruiting them is incredibly difficult. Arsinoe says that is precisely what she wants to understand. She begins to question why a Lappi who treasures freedom would choose this path. He looks away, flustered. As she points out, he could have lived an easy life back home. She grabs him and demands to know his real reason, startling him with her intensity. The moment is interrupted by Jen, who reports that 8,000 enemy soldiers are approaching, just as Arsinoe predicted, much to Whis' relief. Arsinoe smiles, confirming their plan is to lure the enemy forces inside the palace. Confidently, she declares that she is a genius and they will not lose. She turns to Jen with a bright smile, ordering him to go cause chaos. With a sharp-toothed grin, Jen prepares to face the incoming enemy. The Lycan soldiers brace for the incoming assault. With a fierce grin, Jen rallies his troops, promising a rack of lamb for every enemy they defeat. The scene shifts to the capital port under a starry sky. Feeling dizzy, the Duke is supported by an aide. He regains his composure, stating his plan is unfolding perfectly. Standing before his army, the Duke receives a resounding yes from his troops. A light-haired knight steps forward, offering to escort his lord. The Duke reflects that victory is decided by careful preparation. He reveals his deception, having let 2,000 troops be spotted to lure Arsinoe into a false sense of security. He dismisses her chances with utter confidence. The Duke orders his men to release dream incense upon entering the palace to neutralize the Lycans, but his knight voices concern for their own. Dismissing the concern, the Duke coldly states they have very few Lycans with them anyway. A panicked shout rings through the palace. Damn it! It's dream incense. Move! The Lycan soldiers stagger as enemy spearmen charge, screaming for their capture. Jen curses, ordering his soldiers inside to protect his majesty. A young soldier, dazed, holds a piece of incense, questioning their situation. Another soldier cheerfully notes their success will bankrupt the commander on lamb ribs, but is told to keep fighting. Jen orders his troops to fall back as far as possible. He grimaces, realizing the devastating effect of the dream incense. As an enemy soldier lunges, Jen swiftly disables him, nonchalantly saying, "Oops, my bad." The scene shifts to the grand, empty hall of the palace. A legion of the Duke's armored soldiers marches into the hall. Jen rushes to Arsinoe, announcing the enemy's arrival. She commends his work and tells him to hide. As the Lycans retreat, one happily chants lamb chops, and Arsinoe thanks them for their efforts. Jen angrily threatens his subordinate to ensure he protects Her Majesty properly. A blood-curdling scream echoes from a distant, brightly lit doorway. Thud, Whis lands, contemptuously asking who the low-ranking punk is to be barking orders. Arsinoe watches them, cheerfully remarking that fighting will make them closer friends. Outside, the Duke's soldiers shout triumphantly, having found the fake princess. A woman in a white dress gestures for them to follow her. The soldiers eagerly give chase, fighting each other for the reward. An armored soldier looks up towards a brilliant light in the cathedral hall. The soldiers are stunned to see a figure with massive white wings on a high balcony. A single, powerful white wing spreads wide. As feathers drift down, a magical orb forms around a beautiful flower. On a swing high above, Arsinoe smiles slyly, asking the soldiers, "Do I look like a fake?" The soldiers stare up in stunned silence. One shouts that she's escaping and frantically calls for archers. Arsinoe playfully offers to spare their lives if they surrender. She declares she broke the glass ceiling for this moment, urging Whis to fly as they must finish before dawn. Whis lands with Arsinoe on the high ramparts of the palace. 3 soldiers bow to Her Majesty. She thanks them for their hard work. Arsinoe stands on the ramparts, surveying the scene below. She crosses her arms in a resolute X shape. Raising a determined fist, she gives the order, "Seal off the palace." A soldier watches as the grand palace gates begin to close. On the castle walls, a soldier gives the signal to mobilize. Troops quickly take up defensive positions along the ramparts. A line of royal archers draw their bows, taking aim at the trapped army. Arsinoe herself holds a bow, the tip of her arrow ignited with magical fire. Arsinoe unleashes a flaming arrow. A heavy weight shatters the castle gate. An enemy soldier shouts in panic about an ambush from appearing reinforcements. A hail of arrows rains down upon the surprised soldiers. Arsinoe strategizes to isolate the enemy and break their morale until Walter arrives. A soldier announces that Rafi's winged squad has arrived to reinforce them. The winged soldiers drop sacks from the sky onto the courtyard below. A hand reaches out as the single word echoes, "Fire." The sacks burst into flames, engulfing the courtyard and the Duke's troops. Whis lands and asks if Arsinoe is safe. She confirms she is fine, but chides him for harming his people. Arsinoe promises to open the palace's medicinal spring baths for the winged soldiers once the battle is won. She glances back with a resolute expression. Enraged outside the blazing gate, the Duke demands entry but is told the flames make it impossible to approach. The Duke seethes while Arsinoe smirks confidently. The scene shifts to a peaceful, sunlit vineyard. In a grainy flashback, 2 men converse in a garden. The man reveals his knowledge of Arsinoe's plan to use the ceremony to stir unrest and attack the palace. He notes that she is now holding her coronation on the very day she enters. A man tells another that when he becomes king, the other will become one as well. A younger, tearful man protests that his brother is still alive, but is told Aegon has everything he needs. The older man explains that Aegon agreed to live an ordinary life without struggle. The young man looks down. Conflicted, a woman's voice calls out to Atland, her kind son, who was shunned for being born with one eye. Back in the present, an aide reports to the Duke that the fire has scattered their forces and all communications are down. The aide panics, questioning how their 4,000 men were overpowered by mere standing forces. The Duke realizes with horror that the palace was only guarded by lichens, explaining their fast retreat. A soldier runs in, shouting that a massive force is advancing from the forest road. The scene shifts to the rustling leaves of a dense forest. The Duke watches in shock as the command's army arrives unexpectedly fast, and he orders his men into formation. A silver-haired archer takes aim with deadly focus. Royal archers leap from the castle walls, raining arrows on the Duke's soldiers. The Duke's subordinate screams for a counterattack, but despairs at the overwhelming number of enemies. Amidst the chaos of battle, an eye widens in terror. The Duke's subordinate collapses, defeated on the battlefield. Walter arrives on horseback, surveying the outcome of the battle. A letter from Arsinoe offers Duke Hale one last chance to surrender or face judgment. A messenger reads the letter, and the Duke furiously rejects the offer, ordering the messenger killed. The Duke's subordinate looks on in confusion. Walter appears holding a captive at sword point, whom the Duke recognizes as his son, Atland. The Duke screams in fury, demanding Walter release his son. He descends into a frantic panic, pleading for this not to happen. Walter offers a chilling choice: surrender or watch his son die. Duke Hale stares, his expression a mixture of cold fury and defeat. Crying, Atland apologizes to his father over and over. The scene transitions to a sunlit forest, as Arsinoe wonders why a royal secret passage leads there. Whis calls Arsinoe strong-stomached, but she says she's just grateful for a hiding spot and teases him about the dirt. He retorts that being a soldier doesn't mean he has to like filth or bugs. Arsinoe playfully sticks her tongue out, causing Whis to recoil dramatically. A woman with a censored finger gesture sticks out her tongue in a final taunt. A dark-haired man glares intensely as someone off-screen remarks that he looks ready to throw a punch. Arsinoe apologizes to the winged man, explaining that seeing him brings back memories, prompting his skeptical retort about what memories she could share with the cricket. She playfully asks if he has ever eaten one, causing the flustered man to beg her to stop teasing him. With a serious expression, she insists she is not teasing. A dark, fractured memory reveals a suffering man and, below him, a sinister purple-eyed man smiling cruelly. Arsinoe's eyes burn with an intense, fiery resolve. In a beautiful white gown, she looks over her shoulder with a confident, knowing smile. Her radiant smile remains as she looks back triumphantly. The winged man reports that the Duke has surrendered and been taken hostage to headquarters by the Grand General. He declares victory to a stunned-looking Arsinoe. Announcing she is going to sleep, Arsinoe promptly collapses on the deck, much to the confusion of her companions. Bathed in a warm, gentle light, she rests peacefully. A title card marks the beginning of a new chapter. The story moves to the magnificent imperial palace of the empire. In a flashback, a man's voice narrates that Arsinoe will be ready for the banquet as her hair is styled. The man fastens a necklace around her throat, admiring her beauty. Arsinoe stares at her somber reflection in an ornate mirror. Back in her room, she wonders where her cat, Lumi, is, and decides to search for her outside. Her thoughts are interrupted as a bouquet of tulips is presented to her. The gift is from a charming, purple-eyed man who addresses her as Your Highness. He leans over her chair, explaining with a smile that he had to be present for his beloved consort's birthday. Her hand clenches her dress as a voiceover reveals she turned him down. He presents an ornate box, certain that she will like his gift. Her eyes widen slightly as she examines the present. With gloved hands, she carefully opens the box. A splash of red appears as a horrified scream escapes her. The box falls, revealing a bloody, severed cat's paw inside. The man leans back over her chair in a disturbingly unnatural pose. He smiles cruelly, calling her affection for others a waste of such beauty. Shaking with terror, Arsinoe stammers in disbelief. Leaning close, he reminds her that he only asked her to stop petting a local stray. Her mind screams for him to get his hand off of her. A bloody memory shows him dragging her away. As narration reveals, she became king. As her body sinks into a red abyss, she vows she did it all to take his head. The memory of his cruel smile lingers in the darkness. Whap! The nightmare shatters as she strikes out, cursing him. Her vision clears to reveal Walter, looking down at her with a gentle expression. Realizing it was a dream, she calls Walter's name, and he worriedly asks if she's all right, noting her pale complexion. Walter explains that they are at the residence of the House of Heiberg, as the palace is currently unusable. He informs her that they have repelled the enemy forces and successfully imprisoned Duke Kiel. Walter sits in quiet contemplation beside her. As she expresses her guilt, Walter tells her to rest, assuring her that his training allows him to function without sleep. A faint, gentle smile appears on his face. In a playful tone, Walter suggests she must be unwell, claiming she clung to him all night. A blushing Arsinoe demands to know what he's talking about, as he adds, she was in thin clothes the whole time. He leans in close to feel her forehead for a fever. His hand gently rests against her skin. He tenderly supports her as she sits up. Walter effortlessly lifts her into his arms. The scene transitions to the snowy exterior of a grand mansion. Through an ornate window, Walter is seen carrying Arsinoe through a brightly lit hall. A man leans over a woman in white, resting on a bed. A voice explains the opposing forces were common folk, backed by houses Rutherford and Rass. A man and woman stand together overlooking a sprawling city. An unseen person praises the Grand General for his impressive victory, but a note reveals he hates compliments as he responds awkwardly. The dark-haired man recalls being uneasy on his journey from the duchy. He now leans over the woman in bed, who asks him to repeat himself. The dark-haired man gazes down at her with a serious expression. She reveals she's holding a grudge against the man who gave her a jeweled box, vowing with a menacing grin to crush his skull with it. A hand grips the bedsheets tightly in agitation. The woman suddenly looks down, blushing and flustered. The dark-haired man, sitting on her bed, asks if she is feeling unwell. She looks up at him coyly, saying his promise to kill her enemy makes her want to marry him. The dark-haired man is left completely baffled by her sudden demand. The scene transitions, showing a grand, ornate set of double doors. The woman smirks to herself with a knowing look. Her thoughts reveal her work is not yet done. There are still people she must secure. A man walks into darkness, his thoughts revealing he believes only one person can kill his target and that this life will be his last. With Duke Kale removed, the foxes will move to seize the throne, and there are two candidates. The woman sits up in her bed, lost in thought. Feeling utterly exhausted from the ordeal, she decides she should sleep for now. A bright blue sky signals a new scene. As narration begins, most believe war. The thought continues over a view of a grand estate. The scene shifts to a vast office where the dark-haired Grand General is buried in paperwork, attended by a white-haired winged man. A hand diligently writes, as a note describes the endless post-war reports and petitions. The winged man struggles with a massive armful of scrolls, lamenting the lack of space. The winged man offers the busy Grand General some tea. The general politely refuses, not wanting to risk a spill, while someone thinks that all the carrying makes them feel like a monster. The winged man asks about the fate of Guadalquivir, the janitor. The Grand General smirks, admitting he once thought such a sentence was too mild for a traitor. The winged man listens with a troubled expression. The punishment is revealed to be a warning. Any noble who opposes the ruler will be demoted to a custodian. A lone figure stands before a massive building, labeled as one who has fallen. The figure holds a broom. As the narration concludes, they can never again be a figure of honor. The winged man looks on, admitting to the Grand General that his previous judgment was shallow. He reminds the general of a significant decision to be made at the day's assembly. Fastening his uniform, the Grand General smiles, deciding he must go to her at once. A determined footstep marks the beginning of a journey. Arsinoe appears, now dressed in a sharp, white military uniform, walking with purpose. The scene shifts to a beautiful, sprawling palace complex. Inside, a grand hall is filled with conversing nobles. A light-haired man covers his mouth thoughtfully. A smiling, red-haired woman holds his hand, noting that someone is already preparing to rejoin society. The man suggests that His Majesty may have extended a hand to him because he was impressed. He is accused of staking his citizens' lives, but he calmly states Her Majesty guaranteed their safety, drawing scorn for believing honeyed words. The red-haired woman watches the exchange with a subtle, knowing smile. An unseen person calls the Lord narrow-minded, reminding him of the known discord between him and Duke Kale. The red-haired woman reveals she sided with Her Majesty purely to obtain medicinal supplies, wondering aloud with a sly smile what would have happened to her if the Duke had won. After the man expresses his relief, the woman feigns guilt for their success, prompting a flustered denial from him before she coolly takes her leave. As she walks away, her pleasant expression dissolves into a cold, calculating glare. A light-haired man frets, fearing he will inherit everything from the fallen Duke Keel. A door creaks open. Nobles mill about a grand hall as the assembly begins. Arsinoe and the dark-haired Grand General enter, and she commands everyone to be seated. The red-haired woman glances back, surprised to see Arsinoe in a military uniform. An unseen speaker announces the next order of business, selecting who will manage the Keel Duchy. The red-haired woman suggests entrusting the duchy to the lords, who have long managed their lands. Arsinoe listens with a neutral expression. An older nobleman, identified as Count Boubel, prepares to speak. Count Boubel proposes making the duchy a royal domain, while another wonders if Lord Witten and Lord Rutherford are the intended candidates. The light-haired man and red-haired woman exchange tense glances as the suggestion is made. Count Boubel argues that a joint governorship is wiser, as the pirate-infested Western Sea is too much for a single lord to handle alone. The Count smiles, pleased with his seemingly sound logic. His thoughts reveal a cunning plan. Joint rule gives glory to the crown while burdening the lords, allowing the council to control them. Arsinoe accepts his fine suggestion, entrusting the two nobles with joint governance. She then stuns them by decreeing all profits will be split 50-50 with the royal family. The scene shifts to a map of the contested territory. The two nobles realize only the valuable western region with Portmire Harbor remains, and both resolve to claim it. The red-haired woman speaks first, confidently claiming the western region due to her experience with ports. Outraged, the light-haired man slams the table, arguing Portmire is a key diplomatic point that requires real skill to manage. The red-haired woman dismisses his insult, boasting of her established diplomatic relations and cultural salons. The light-haired man finds her audacity amusing. He scoffs that real diplomacy isn't done from a desk, earning a menacing smile from the woman before someone interjects. Arsinoe rises, ordering them both to calm themselves and sit down. As they settle, She muses on the immense strategic importance of Portmire. The two rivals sit in tense silence, glaring at one another. Alord's face shadowed with thought. They both recoil in shock, realizing the decision lies between them. Arsinoe beams, delighted at having set them against each other. The scene transitions to a peaceful, sunlit forest path. Arsinoe chuckles softly to herself, amused. Riding alongside the Grand General, she admits she found their reactions hilarious, feeling more playful with age. The general asks her a question as they ride, noting the immense value of the Kiel Duchy. Arsinoe gazes into the distance, contemplating her next move. A faint, knowing smile plays on her lips. The general asks what she wants to see, finding it hard to understand why she entrusted such valuable land to those two. He quickly apologizes for doubting her, but she says she appreciates it, as it helps her organize her thoughts. Arsinoe continues to ponder the situation. Her thoughts drift to Duke Kiel's fall, from his position as the top candidate for king. She wonders if the other lords will truly follow her, the new king who took his place. The general insists they will, but Arsinoe thinks they will just see her as a rookie. She laughs, telling the confused general that the lords likely credit him, Walter, for Duke Kiel's defeat. Arsinoe explains that while Walter was a great general, she was seen as an unimportant child, leaving Walter looking troubled. She touches his shoulder, explaining that the lords will let their guard down around Lucy. Her plan is revealed. She is using the duchy as bait to draw out her enemies. Her eyes gleam with determination as she vows to stay strong until their true faces are revealed. The general asks if there are other traitors to expel, and Arsinoe considers the question. She recalls the countless people she's met through her repeating lives. She looks over at the general beside her. A golden light frames him as narration states that he, the man before her, was different. A memory of a grand castle burns against the night sky. In the past, Walter fought relentlessly until the moment of his death. In all three of her past lives, he alone protected Parnassus. While Walter fought, others were busy either fleeing or surrendering. Arsinoe recalls the nobles who betrayed them, resolving to confirm if a certain spy will turn traitor once again. Arriving at their destination, Arsinoe shields her eyes from the sudden brightness. They reach a grand white castle, where they are greeted by the one who always stood with Walter. A new chapter begins, signified by a title card with an ornate sword. Arsinoe, Walter, and the winged man enter the temple of the nameless god. A young priest bows deeply, pledging his unwavering service to Her Majesty. Arsinoe glances back, confused by the boy's formality, while Walter remains stoic. The young priest leads them down an arched hall, announcing the way to the chapel. The winged aide learns the ascetics here are nameless, having severed all worldly ties to serve their god. Walter watches the exchange with a subtle, knowing smile. He asks if their shaved heads are part of the tradition, as the young priest continues to lead the way. The winged aide finds the concept strange, muttering that he's on the fluffy side, before a sudden realization hits him. Aghast, he clutches his head as a feather falls, a byproduct of his irreverent thoughts. After quickly composing himself, the winged aide rejoins the group as they proceed. Arsinoe turns to Walter with a curious smile, asking if something is true. The young priest explains that the divine sword, Dawn, remained untouched in the basement as no one could lift it. Suddenly, a powerful man named Sir Hyverg lifts the sword, stunning the onlookers. The winged aide recalls the oracle. The master of Dawn will reveal the god's true name, questioning if it isn't simply nameless god. He dismisses the name as ridiculous, but the priest's serious stare reminds him that he, too, uses a number for a name. An old prophecy reveals that when the god's name returns, he will descend upon the world. The young priest excitedly declares Walter the prophesied hero, much to Arsinoe's shock and the winged aide's amusement. Flustered by the attention, Walter urges them to hurry on to avoid falling behind schedule. The scene transitions back to the gleaming white exterior of the temple. As they walk, the young priest and Arsinoe gush over Sir Hyverg, calling him handsome and perfect. Walter sternly reminds them to be quiet, as they are in a sacred place. As Arsinoe watches him, she notices his ears have turned red with embarrassment. She smirks, delighting in his flustered state and vowing to tease him like this more often. Her playful mood vanishes, replaced by a cold, serious expression as she steps forward. Arsinoe greets a haggard-looking man, addressing him by his now fallen title, Duke Kiel.